You know, if there's one thing most people love within popular media, it's rivalries. There are a ton of different iconic rivalries that have lasted many years, and most are still going on to this very day. Lakers vs Celtics, Star Wars vs Harry Potter, Ketchup vs Mustard, myself vs Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I promise I'm not bitter. What's another example? Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz vs Perry the Platypus. Yeah, I know it's been 7 years, but still, it's an iconic rivalry. Some are just for friendly competition, while others are legit super dangerous. Take my personal rivalry with Smash Bros. Ultimate. There's a lot of tough love. It became more tough because I'm garbage, and the game knows that because we have the entire second Fighters Pass. It's just toxic all around. It wasn't a healthy relationship. Although I never thought I would say this, but Sora was the best part of that Fighters Pass. I just can't stand everyone else. I wouldn't be mad, upset, or surprised if I was put on the list for saying that. Speaking generally, rivalries make things so much more interesting. It's always great to see who comes out on top and which community is gonna be the most toxic. But let's move away from the more realistic rivalries, even though most of them are relatively fictional, but we're actually going to move on to video game rivalries. Remember when everyone took console wars as seriously as actual wars? To think it still goes on today, which is very sad. It was Nintendo versus Sony versus Microsoft for a bit, and then when Nintendo and Microsoft got into bed with each other, it turned into Nintendo versus Sony, which is a classic that has gone back and forth for years, especially with their history in the past of having the opportunity to work on big time consoles together, but Nintendo made a decision that changed gaming forever. But a lot of video game rivalries are based on characters. Scorpion vs Sub-Zero, Ryu vs Ken, Red vs Blue, Roger Jr. vs Alex. The biggest similarity between these classic rivalries are that they're all from the same franchises and games alike, even though there have been a great number of games that have formed rivalries against each other. But there is one huge gaming rivalry that basically set the tone for future feuds. It's really a shame that it didn't last as long as it could have, but what would happen if it never existed? You know, it's funny how this rivalry went from roasting each other in commercials and trying to one-up each other every chance they got. Then as time went by, there was a very quick winner. And in my eyes, I never thought these two franchises would ever work together to make any fun games. Mario vs Sonic is one of the most iconic video game rivalries of all time, even though it didn't last as long as it probably should have. I'd like to think it started with Genesis does what Nintendo don't, which is still super memorable to this day. Sega throwing shade at Nintendo because Sonic at the time seemed like it could be of equal quality as Mario. So what the hell happened? Well, the Sega Dreamcast was a good console, but flopped so hard that it caused Sega to become a third-party company in video games. It was that impactful. Sonic Adventure was a great game, but it could not carry that console to glory on a consistent level. It's easy as this. As soon as the Dreamcast was released, it was immediately laying in its deathbed and stayed that way for 3 years. The potential for Mario vs Sonic during the Bits era was off the charts high. It could have been the Lakers and Celtics of video games, but it soon fell flat on its face as soon as things were getting good. Clearly it was Sega's fault for getting a big head thinking they could get far with creating consoles, but at least they tried and actually got somewhere with it. So ever since the self-KO of Sega, at some point they decided to just continue making their own first-party games and releasing them on all major platforms. And as you know, they still do that to this day. It's gonna be like that forever until they go under. I honestly think this is what should have happened from the start, but I'm glad that they learned from everything. Because we have to remember, they still made some really bad games. At least they're not making really bad consoles. The Genesis was a massive hit, the Saturn was weird but charming, the Game Gear just had to exist for some reason, and the Dreamcast seemed like the next big step up but turned out to be the key to failure. When I was younger and I learned about this rivalry, I never thought Nintendo and Sega would create a game with both of their biggest icons together because I was a dumbass kid who didn't know about anything. And to think they both got a game together before Smash Bros. Brawl. Okay, so before we take a deeper look into this unexpected collab, I want to talk about one of my favorite worldwide events that happens every 2 years, the Olympics. I'll try to make this as brief as I can, but this is important to my connection with the following franchise. But the Olympics is a great way for every country in the world to represent their best athletes in the greatest competition for as many gold medals as possible, even though it is just some amazing competition. I was introduced into the Olympics in 2008, but really got into it in 2012 when they were in London. And I've watched every single summer and winter Olympic event ever since. Well, except winter 2022 because I just completely forgot about it. I'm so sorry. The Olympics make me very happy. From the opening ceremony to the sports being played at high levels, it's a thrill and always manages to put a smile on my face. The only thing I don't like about the Olympics is that it has to end and it's always so short. I understand why it's so short, but I feel like we could get a lot more if they were a little bit longer, like a few weeks longer. But what if we put Mario, Sonic, and the Olympics together? Well, at some point you get Sonic at the Olympic Games on mobile, but I think sending them to Beijing first was the correct answer. So funny enough, after Sega went the third-party route, the relationship between them and Nintendo was surfing on the more positive side of things. It makes sense because you can't have a one-sided rivalry with one being at the top of the mountain living in luxury while the other is in poverty mode. Sega and Nintendo both worked together on the GameCube classic F-Zero GX, as it was their first ever legitimate collaboration with each other. Apparently, there were talks between Miyamoto and Yuji Naka about a possible crossover game between Mario and Sonic, but during the time nothing was really acted on, mainly because there wasn't a big lightbulb idea to work off of. But soon enough, Sega got awarded the Beijing 2008 Olympic license, and that allowed for some creativity and a lot of ideas thrown at the wall. And someone else had to have mentioned Mario's name because that would screw up all the narratives that Sega and Nintendo don't want anything to do with each other. I highly doubt it though. At the time, these were the two biggest faces in gaming, and the fact that they were going to be in the same game for the first time ever seemed like a fever dream. But luckily there was no bad blood between these companies, and that's how Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games got greenlit for development. Also, the idea for putting these two in the Olympics was show off that friendly rivalry between mascots and other characters within the respective franchises. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Beijing 2008 was released on the Nintendo Wii, surprisingly first in North America, November 6, 2007, November 22nd, 2007 in Japan, and a day later in Europe. I also want to mention that there's a DS version of this game, and it's a completely different experience from its console counterpart, but we're going to be focusing on the Wii for today. So let's see which franchise can win the most gold medals. It's hard to be biased when I love both franchises. This is Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. When you have a game where you put multiple franchise all-stars in one game, the roster could have so much star power, but I'm not expecting too much for the first game since this could become a franchise on its own. So our athletes are split up into categories based on their area of athletic expertise. Once you look at them and the archetype, you'll understand why. We got power characters, all-arounders, speedy characters, and the more skillful brain users. 2 characters from each franchise in every category, rounding up a total of 16 characters, even though that is a lie because there are actually 17 characters. We'll get into that special character in a minute. 8 from Mario and 8 from Sonic, and they all have their own stats based on those categories. Let's start off with Team Red. Mario and Luigi are the most balanced characters in the game. Are you surprised? That's what I thought. Bowser and Wario take up the more physical area. Peach and Waluigi will use their brains most of the time, and Yoshi and Daisy are the speedsters of Team Red. On the other half, Sonic and Shadow are obviously the fastest characters in the game, so why else wouldn't they be speed characters? Dr. Eggman and Tails are the smartest characters in the game as well. Amy and Blaze take up the all-arounder spots, and finally we got Knuckles and Vector. They both have long limbs but are still physically strong. Not a bad way to start with this being the first of many, at least on consoles. We can definitely add more in the future, but this is a good start. Certain characters will be really good at specific sports, but that doesn't mean that you can't get the hammer throw world record with Peach. Everyone can do everything, but they all exceed in their own sport. Power characters are good at more physically demanding sports, skill types are a lot weaker but use their smarts to get a win, speed characters prefer anything regarding their legs, and all-arounders can do pretty much everything else. There is no right or wrong here. I use Blaze and Luigi basically all the time and you don't see me complaining. We can also play as our Miis. The Miis are basically Mario if he was an OC with 2006 creativity. They even share some of the same animations, and I eventually figured out that the Miis were basically sharing Mario's model, the only difference being body shape and head size. Surprisingly, these Miis have massive hands. Nothing too important, just very noticeable. So the roster is nice, but what about the sports we play? Think of this as a much better and more fun deck of sports game. Minigame collections that fit the idea of putting Tails in the Olympics. We got ourselves 24 sports, so let's dive into it. I'll try not to go too deep into every sport because they're all super simple to begin with, and even the most quote-unquote complex sports are still dangerously simple and easy to understand, but not to the game's detriment. Starting off with the athletic sports, we have two subcategories of track and field sports. But let's start off with running fast because of a fake gun. 100 meters, 110 meter hurdles, 400 meters, 400 meter hurdle, and the 4x100 meter relay. Because this is after 2006, we live in the world of motion control, so these sports require you to shake the Wii remote like you're masturbating. So these sports require you to shake the Wii remote as fast as you can and your character reaches top speed throughout the race. Although that only works in the 100 meter, the 110 meter hurdles, and the relay. But with the 400 meters and the hurdles, you have to manage your stamina. Don't let the unembodied heart drain all the way down or else you'll actually die. Am I over exaggerating? You'll find out here in a minute. If so, you'll become staggered and slow down big time and you'll have to play catch up. You gotta pace yourself. Keep your speed to a minimum but go fast enough to be able to go for a strong finish. During the final push, you can sprint with all your might and your meter will go down slowly but also kind of fast at the same time. So you have to have good timing on when to start sprinting based on how much meter you've used. This is a good start. Now moving on to the field sports. Hammer throw, javelin, long jump, triple jump, pole vault, and the high jump. The general idea for all these sports is to aim for the highest number against your fellow competitors after a number of tries. I don't need to explain the concept of throwing a javelin and trying to avoid any cameramen on the side. It will be a sad day if we saw Espio with a javelin through his head. Next up is racing in the water. In general, whether it's in game or in real life, aquatics are some of my favorite sports in the Olympics. We got the 100 meter freestyle and the 4x100 meter relay. First place wins and manage your stamina in all of them, but it's not as strict as the 400 meters. Now when it comes to swimming, every character has their own swim stroke. Hence why it's called freestyle, because I don't want to see Bowser attempt to swim the butterfly. Also Sonic, Tails, and Yoshi swim doggy style. I'll just leave that there for a second. Having to manage your stamina before staggering is here, but a lot more simple and more enjoyable in my eyes. It's always fun to see Wario and Bowser attempt a breaststroke. Next up are gymnastics. Surprisingly, we only got two sports here, the trampoline and the vault. When jumping on a trampoline, just make sure there isn't any dish soap because no one likes a broken neck. You start off getting as high as you possibly can, and once you get that ultra satisfying high, you start doing all the tricks. Press all the buttons you see before you sober up. Highest score wins. The vault, on the other hand, is a lot more fun than getting high, although personally I wouldn't know. Run up the vault, do some tricks, and in order to stick the landing, shake your Wii remote like crazy and you'll be fine. Next up, we got a bunch of solo sports: archery, rowing, shooting, table tennis, and fencing. Let's start off with the most boring and work our way up to the more interesting. So once you look at that, fencing is first. Just thrust your Wii remote and you'll stab. The gameplay is kinda bland, but it's to be expected for trying to convert fencing into a video game. Table tennis is next on the list. It can be pretty slow at times, but when momentum gets up, things get a lot more fun. But because of the initial speed of the sport, it does make things a little tough to get into. Time to pull out a gun. This sport probably plays into a lot of different fantasies, even though one of those fantasies was actually a video game. So at least there's some experience there. Although I never thought I'd see the day where Amy would wield a gun. So we have to prepare our shot. Just make sure the white dot doesn't flatline. Get it as close to the middle of the heart as you can. This will determine how big your crosshair becomes, which will either make skeets easier or harder to hit depending on the preparation. 8 rounds, highest score wins, and just continue giving Amy a hammer for safekeeping. Now it's time to row our boat aggressively down some random water that might be part of an ocean. We have to mash the buttons shown and shake the Wii remote. The higher number of music notes, the faster you go. It's really simple, but it can be a strain on the arm. Finally is archery. Throw caution to the wind because it'll throw it right back in your face when you miss the target completely. Aim down the target with the Wii remote and nunchuck. Make sure they're together at all times and shoot. As a reminder, that is not how relationships are made, so don't try being Cupid because you'll probably have a fun encounter with the police. So those are all the normal events in their vanilla forms. But let's say we take it up a notch and get more creative. Well, we have ourselves 4 unique events that completely change the way the sports are played. These are dream events. Olympic events that are taken to another level to make these games a lot more fun and memorable. Most of the time they're better than the sport they expand on, but that's what makes them fun and memorable in all these games. We got ourselves 4 dream events: dream fencing, race, table tennis, and platform. Dream fencing is the same as normal fencing, but instead of going for a certain amount of points, it becomes a fighting game with special moves based on your character's archetype. Dream race, on the other hand, is a 4-lap Mario Kart race on foot with Mario and Sonic items. Every lap becomes becomes more annoying to deal with as we get more robots just walking around having fun ruining my mission runs. Dream Table Tennis is much better than the original because depending on how long the rally goes for, depends on how many points is given to the winner of that rally. The final Dream event is the most interesting and one of my favorites in the entire franchise, Dream Platform. The absolute peak of Olympic sports that will never happen for understandable reasons. We dive from 10,000 meters up in the air. We have to avoid spiked balls, collect items, and earn points by going through these rings and doing tricks. Whoever has the most points by the big splash at the end wins. It's the most fun event in my opinion because of how different it is. It stands out so much in all the right ways from everything else. So if I had to give these sports a combined rating out of 10 based on enjoyability and quality, there are a lot of options and a good number I personally enjoy, but others I genuinely look over because I either never think about them or I just don't like the gameplay enough. But I'll give these games a nice 6.5 out of 10. It's good for what it's got, but it could be a lot better when it comes to the overall quality and memorability. Okay, we got ourselves 5 game modes to play around with, and one thing I really do love about these games is the variety of content, although sometimes it can feel a little watered down as you either stick to one or play everything enough times and boom, you played everything in an hour. Starting off with single match, you can play any sport you want at any time. Every sports game has this mode where you can do whatever you want, although customization is a bit limited because there are a few sports where you can change how many sets you play and how many points are needed to win and all that good stuff, but those are not available in most of the sports in this game for understandable reason because they don't need it. Moving on to circuit mode, this is where we play a gauntlet lineup of sports and rile up points based on placing. Whoever has the most points by the end of the circuit is the winner. There are 16 unique circuits based on one of 3 classes, and I'm not so sure what they're based on. Maybe it's CPU difficulty, but I'm not so sure. Either way, I really enjoy this mode and the inclusion of being able to build your own circuits based on the number of competitors and even just going random with it. I'm pretty sure there is something similar to this in real life at the Olympics, but I don't remember what it's called. Someone remind me. Moving on to probably my favorite mode alongside circuit is mission mode. Just like every Mario Kart game after DS, I can't believe they never brought this back in future games. The waste of amazing potential is crazy here. You know, the more I look into it, there is a ton of potential to have mission modes in future Mario and Sonic games. I just don't understand it. Mission mode is where we pick a character and they all have 6 different missions of different varieties, from beating your rival in a race to getting a certain place or time, throwing a specific distance, and a lot more. It comes out to a total of 96 missions with their own difficulty, as a lot are easier than others. Some have great variety with their missions like Bowser, Mario, and Amy, but that's where Shadow comes in. 5 out of 6 defeat your rival missions. I understand that Sonic and Shadow's rivalry is big time. Granted, it is one of the most confusing rivalries in all of gaming because of the complicated history and the inconsistency, but it still works. But 5 out of 6? Come on, Shadow, you're better than this. You have your own game, for God's sake. This is a great mode. Should have been in future games, but we'll get there when we get there. Next on the list is the gallery. Some fun, smaller content to play around with. We got ourselves 5 different mini games that give us a lot of cool information about the 2008 Olympics, from trivia to events from ancient to modern, and even athletes. We have to play these mini games in order to unlock these artifacts, and it's a really nice change of pace. Voice memory and card game are the best of these 5 in my opinion, even though I will admit the sound effects of card game are terrible, like Asta screaming. It's absolutely terrifying. The final mode is a lot more tame as we can take a look at our records, both personal and worldwide, but you have to remember that this is 2024. We can see our personal world and Olympic records, and even our collection of character emblems from completing character missions, circuit trophies, medals for every character per event, accomplishment emblems, and more. It's a nice way to track your progress and flex your ability to defeat CPUs without having to change it to hard mode, although it's not on easy mode either. The overall thought of putting Mario and Sonic through the Olympic Games is a very fun and interesting idea. I do believe there was a lot of great ideas thrown at the wall here, and this sets a great base for future games and improvements. Circuit mode, mission mode, the raw difficulty of opponents, even the graphics hit different compared to the more colorful, cartoony tones of future games. It makes the game feel a lot more significant compared to the sequels. There are a lot of sports I enjoy, everything aquatics, every single race, every Field Event, Dream Table Tennis, The Vault, Archery, and Dream Platform. But that also comes with the ones I just look over because I have no general interest in playing them, more so normal table tennis and fencing, although I'm more in the gray area with everything else, which isn't a bad thing because if I have to play them, I wouldn't mind it, but it'll also go by super fast unlike playing Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It feels like every match takes an eternity to finish. Well, this is a great start to a franchise with tons of potential to be a top sports IP. With the advantage of having the permissions and license to the Olympic Games, nothing can really stop Sega and Nintendo from making some awesome products and also bringing light to the actual Olympics, just like it did for me. This game did that for me big time when I played it for the first time, and it was a big reason as to why I anticipate the Olympic Games every 2 years. Although regarding this fun experience, there's clearly a lot to be desired, but first games are hard and most of the time is hit or miss. But luckily Sega and Nintendo hit big time as we got so much more in the future. Also, in case you're wondering, I'm not going to review Sonic at the Olympic Games on mobile. I'd rather sink all that time into playing the newest Hello Kitty game and making a review on it.